Hello, I'm Bruce Zimmerman, and this is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week. Now, in our gardens at this time of year, we've sort of got the time to stop and smell the roses, if you have roses, but we have to stop and look and analyze. And very often, this is what we don't do. We are doing a garden walk. We are sitting on our patios. We are doing things that we would take and normally never do in a very busy spring. So what you've got now is this. You have to go and analyze and make notes. What's right, what's wrong, and how you can improve it. So what you want to do is exactly that. Now, if you're doing an early morning garden walk, what you're looking for are problems. And this can be both bugs or disease, or you can see plants that are suffering, whether it's because of excess moisture, drought. They need to be fed. I've noticed that my sunflowers all need to be fed, so they got the food ASAP. Because, let's be honest, it's now middle of July, and I want big sunflowers as soon as possible. So we've got those being dealt with a water-soluble fertilizer to be quick. But we're still getting a good amount of moisture. Now, this is leaching out fertilizers, and therefore a water-soluble fertilizer may or may not last very long. But at least it's immediate, and when it was applied, we had no real rain, and therefore it was able to be absorbed because it's quick. So, again, you never fertilize a plant that's dry, but neither do you fertilize it with a water-soluble fertilizer when it's wet, because one overwaters and two burns. So you don't want to do that, so you have to pick your time. You'll also find that a lot of herbs are growing like weeds simply because of the excess amount of moisture around. This also means that the oils are not being concentrated within the leaves, and there's a lot more moisture in there. So if you're harvesting them for fresh use, you may have to use a little bit more because of the lack of concentration of the oils and flavors. Or you may find that it takes longer to dry them. So if you're doing whichever, be considerate and adjust to the environment that they were grown in. Now, the plants themselves are going to be doing extremely well. I've seen plants growing so well that even if they hadn't been really seriously fertilized since spring, that they're doing very well. The new growth is good, long, and lots of leaves are larger. In some cases, you're getting thicker plants, and thicker plants may include some diseases because of lack of air movement and crowding. So you have to sort of take a look as you're doing your garden walk that you can actually go and assess and at the same time decide. Maybe in the fall you want to thin, or you may see some areas that are a little weak and you'll go and want to rearrange and actually put another plant in as well. So the plants themselves are okay, but they're not going to give you that full effect unless you go and plant another plant, and the room just might not be in the right spot for the plant that you need to get. And you need to get the plant that would be suitable. This is usually a plant that requires the same amount of water as the plants in the area. In other words, you're going to plan what you're going to put in there. You also want to plan its color and blooming time and its texture. This is all important as well, so that if some of these plants are not in bloom, their texture or leaf color can actually contribute to the good look of the garden. Once you've gone and done this walk, and you've looked for bugs and you know what you're going to do, you don't do it in the heat of the day. Very often what you'll find is that the plants suffer just like we do in the high heat in the middle of the day. So you're not gardening in the middle of the day. You're not gardening at any time other than when it's cool and comfortable for you, and therefore it'll be cooler and more comfortable for them. And this is so important with summer gardening, that you don't go and stress the plant by moving, doing, etc. at the wrong time of year because of the heat. Though I have done and moved plants, I've taken plants out in the middle of summer, potted them up, moved them into shady locations so that they can adjust to their pots, babied them along, and then replanted in the fall. It can be done, but you have to know the plant. You have to know that it's extremely well rooted and that it's got a good soil mix that you're going to be adding to it. You're able to be there and watch and water and feed. And this is one of the other rules about summer gardening. You're not going to practice any big projects if you're going on vacation. If you're away for a week or two, you're going to find that the garden is going to suffer. Even if someone's coming in and cutting the lawn for you, it doesn't mean that A, they're going to water, B, that the rest of the garden isn't going to suddenly have a plant that is in need of some special care. And when you come back, it's probably so late that what you could have prevented is actually now a bigger problem. Doubtful that the plant, if it was an established plant, has actually died, but it is possible that they did suffer, particularly with annuals and some of the smaller perennials. So if they're planted in the right location, under the right conditions, you probably will be able to bring them back. And I've seen this done many, many times. Clematis being one of the ones. Some of the petunias, particularly the waves, are quite tough. Snapdragons, same thing. If they're established, are really quite tough. Marigolds are tough. If you're using things like the spider plants, which most people use as a house plant in the garden, they are more tolerant of being drought deficient, in moisture, and will recover quite nicely. So it is really up to you, but don't go and do any serious planting and projects just before you're going on vacation. Unless, of course, you've got your own personal gardener who is going to be there all the time to continue your good work. Now, the lawns are going to be cut longer. You're going to need an inch of rain every about 5 to 7 days. And the temperatures we've been having so far, I'll say 7 days. Now, the thing about that is that we have been having enough moisture that you haven't had to. But it doesn't mean that if you went on vacation that was going to continue. So what I want you to do is I want you to get down on your hands and knees or squat down, and I want you to look across your lawn. And what you will find, if it's got a purple haze to it during the day, then you know that the plants on that part of the turf is in drought stress. The other thing, and the way to also test this, is to walk across your lawn, and the footprints should disappear right away. If they don't, if you can see where you've stepped, the leaves of the grass are down, follow your footprints, and don't come back up right away, then you know that you're on the low side of moisture, and that means water. Water in early evening or early morning. But always you want the foliage of the turf to be dry by the time the darkness comes or the heat of the day comes. And that's important. So, early morning, have the lawn watered and dry by about 10 o'clock in the morning. If it's in the evening, by the time it turns dark, you want the leaves of the grass dry. So it's sometime in that early evening time that you're going to water. You may have to run multiple hoses. You may have to put and move it around and do certain areas evening by evening by evening instead of all of it at once in the evening. So follow that. And don't forget to use a rain gauge. You want to make sure that you're applying the right amount of moisture at one time. Not a little bit of sprinkling here, a little bit of sprinkling there. It has to be applied, and that 1 inch of moisture should be applied at one time. So very, very critical that you do follow that rule. With the grass and the turf being a little taller, you're going to get a lot more of the clippings to actually go and break down. You're going to have moisture, you're going to have heat, you're going to have a little bit of fertilizer in there. So the composting on your lawn is going to be more active and much better, and you won't have a lot of thatch built up by fall. So there you go, things that you should be looking at and how you should be looking at your garden at this time of year in the summertime. And the living's supposed to be easy? I don't know. I'm Bruce Zimmerman. This is the Open Line Garden Show podcast for this week.